What if the billionaire who could buy anything on earth was destroyed by the one thing money couldn't touch, a woman's fear? What if the man who owned New York stood on a rooftop one night holding a ring that wasn't rejected because he wasn't loved, but because the world's judgment was louder than love? And what if months later, the same girl who broke him returned with the truth that would finally rebuild him? If this story hit your heart even once, hit like right now and subscribe, because the next chapters of love, betrayal, power, and redemption are coming, and you don't want to miss a single twist of this billionaire's story. New York looked unreal from the top of Cross Tower. The city didn't just shine, it glowed, like it was worshipping the man who owned half of it. Ethan Cross stood alone in the rooftop garden he reserved for only the most private moments of his life. He was used to power, used to dominance, used to getting anything he wanted. Everything in this city bent for him, except her, Olivia Parker, the one girl with ordinary clothes, ordinary background, ordinary everything, yet she was the only thing that ever made his heart feel anything real. Everyone else in his world was noise. She was the only thing that felt like home. And tonight he wanted to risk everything. He never feared losing money. He feared losing her. He had the entire rooftop set with minimal lights, not some expensive romantic setup, because he didn't want to flash wealth. He wanted to show her something raw, real feelings stripped from gold and status. This wasn't about diamonds. This was about a man who never learned how to love correctly, trying to learn for the first time. The wind blew across Manhattan. His heart beat harder than any boardroom deal ever challenged him with. When the elevator door opened and Olivia stepped out, Ethan felt the world slow down. She wasn't wearing some designer dress. She came straight after work. Beige sweater, black jeans, simple, soft, real. She didn't belong in his world of luxury. She belonged in a world that still believed in sincerity and decency. Things he forgot existed. He didn't speak right away. He just watched her. For a moment she felt small under the intensity of his gaze. But she didn't look away. "Why did you ask me to come here, Ethan?" Her voice was nervous but steady. He exhaled. And then he said it. "I need to tell you something." He didn't wait. He opened a small velvet box. Slow, careful, like this was the most fragile decision of his entire life. Inside was a ring. Nothing flashy. No giant diamond. Just a simple, elegant gold band. A symbol of pure intention. Olivia froze. She wasn't expecting this. Ethan wasn't the type to kneel or perform romantic clichés. He simply stood straight, eyes locked on hers, like he was presenting not a ring but his vulnerability. "I want a life with you." He said it softly, but the raw sincerity in his voice could have sliced the sky open. The air changed. Olivia's throat tightened painfully. Her chest started to burn, because yes, she had feelings. She had so many feelings she couldn't even count them sometimes. She would replay tiny moments with him in her mind at night, the way he looked at her during meetings, the way his voice changed when he said her name. Softer, always softer. She wanted him. She wanted him more than she ever admitted, but she couldn't accept, because she knew what New York would say. She knew what people would post online. She knew what gossip pages would do to her. She would be called a gold digger, a girl who climbed out of her father's position to trap the billionaire, a girl who got lucky. Ethan didn't understand how cruel the world could be to a woman with nothing but dignity to protect. Her father would be dragged through media. Her entire name would become a point of mockery. Her lips trembled. She shook her head slightly, her heart breaking as she whispered, "I can't marry you." Ethan blinked once, just once, but that single blink held a storm. The world inside him crashed silently, violently. He didn't shout. He didn't argue. He didn't ask why, because he already knew the reason. She wasn't afraid of him. She was afraid of everything that came with him. His world was toxic, brutal, ruthless. Her entire life would be consumed by people tearing her apart. Olivia stepped back, tears pooling in her eyes because saying no felt like stabbing her own heart. She knew she was hurting him. She knew she was destroying something precious, but she couldn't choose a life that would destroy her self-respect. Ethan didn't move. His voice dropped to a quiet, hollow tone. Understood. The way he said that, like he just accepted a life sentence, shattered her. But she knew she had to walk away, so she turned. One step. Then two. Each step felt like a nail hammered into his soul. And when the elevator doors closed, Ethan felt something inside him collapse, silently, like a skyscraper falling in slow motion. He stood there under the cold New York sky, holding a ring that suddenly felt heavier than the entire city beneath him. That night, the most powerful man in New York learned what heartbreak actually feels like, and Olivia left with tears she couldn't stop, because saying no didn't protect her. It destroyed them both. The next morning, New York woke up. Traffic moved. Screens glowed. Rich people bragged. Poor people worked hard. The world continued spinning like nothing happened, but Ethan Cross stopped. Something inside him had quieted. Something had shut down, quietly like a light switch flicked off in a dark room. He sat in his penthouse living room staring at the skyline. This was the same skyline he once conquered. This was the same city who once cheered his business headlines, feared his power, respected his brutality in negotiations. But now, New York looked like an empty city full of strangers. He didn't go to work that day, or the next day, or the day after. The boardroom which always waited for him, waited in silence. His assistant called. His COO emailed. His CFO texted. No reply. Ethan Cross didn't need sleep. He was the type of man who lived on adrenaline, espresso, and vengeance. But after that rooftop night, he slept for hours and woke up feeling more tired than before. Nothing felt important. Nothing felt worth fighting for. Without Olivia, the world felt like an echo chamber. Meanwhile, at the office, rumors spread like wildfire. Employees whispered, "Is Ethan sick? Is he stepping back? What happened to him?" But no one guessed the truth. The man who never feared losing millions was destroyed by losing one woman. When he finally returned to the office days later, the entire energy of the building changed. People straightened their backs, fixed their ties, sat up straighter. But the moment Ethan walked inside, they noticed it instantly. He wasn't present, he wasn't looking at the numbers. He wasn't scanning documents aggressively. He wasn't demanding strategies. He simply sat in his chair, distant, like a ghost was occupying his body. Meetings that used to last 3 hours ended in 10 minutes. Acquisitions. That used to be battles. He approved automatically, like he didn't care about winning anymore. His staff, his inner circle, his closest allies, they all exchanged looks of pure confusion. Ethan Cross, and who once carried fire in his eyes and now carried ashes, Olivia. Parker, meanwhile, was trapped in a cruel loop of regret. She sat in her bedroom at night, hugging her pillow tightly, tears soaking the fabric while she bit her lip to keep herself from screaming out loud. She regretted every second, every word, every breath. She rejected not Ethan, but the pain she knew the world would put her through. But now she realized she never protected herself. She destroyed herself, because now she had to live with the reality that the one man who looked at her like she was the only heir left in the world was gone. Every night she replayed that rooftop scene. Every night she whispered to herself, "I should have said yes, but she didn't." And she couldn't undo it. She would lie awake until sunrise, gripping her sheets, thinking about how his eyes broke when she said no. She knew disappointment, but she never saw heartbreak like that. And now she was drowning in guilt. At headquarters, Ethan's father-like senior manager, Robert Parker, Olivia's dad, was the only one who noticed the emotional destruction with perfect clarity. Robert had seen Ethan since the early days, when Ethan still worked under his own mentors, before he became the ruthless CEO the world now bowed to. Robert saw Ethan silently fall apart, and he knew instantly this wasn't business. This was Olivia. Robert didn't confront Ethan, didn't mention it, didn't ask. He simply watched with a helpless ache in his chest. His own daughter was the reason Ethan was collapsing internally. Robert felt torn. Loyalty to Ethan Love for his daughter, fear of being stuck in the middle. He watched Ethan lose interest in his empire, and that terrified him because Ethan was born a fighter. If Ethan stops fighting, it means he's bleeding in a place no one can see. Days turned into weeks. The world saw a billionaire CEO, silent, calm, robotic. But inside, Ethan wasn't calm. He simply didn't care anymore. What's the point of winning when the one person you want beside you isn't there? He stopped attending galas, stopped attending celebrity dinners, stopped saying yes to interviews. People asked indirectly. Magazines speculated. Blogs began whispering, is Ethan Cross single again? Is Ethan Cross going through heartbreak? Nobody knew the truth. Nobody knew he went to war with feelings he didn't know how to handle. Ethan used to dominate the world. Now he could barely dominate his own heartbeat. He tried to forget Olivia. He tried to distract himself with work. He tried to bury the memory, but every night, when he looked at the skyline from his penthouse, he remembered she was somewhere in that city, breathing the same air, living under the same stars, and he was still bleeding from the wound she left. Olivia Parker didn't plan to see Ethan again. She planned to stay silent, stay away, live with her regret, swallow her pain, pretend she didn't love him. But some pains don't fade. Some regrets burn the heart every single minute. Weeks passed. Olivia tried to focus on her normal life, helping her mother in the kitchen, going to the office, talking to friends, but everything felt wrong, because the truth was simple. She rejected Ethan to protect her dignity. But in the process, she destroyed her heart, and there comes a moment where silence becomes louder than fear. Olivia reached that moment. One night, she sat alone at the small desk in her bedroom, staring at her phone. She kept scrolling up the same chat with Ethan, the one where he used to send short emails about small things, checking on her, appreciating her ideas, asking her opinion on branding choices, little messages that felt so normal back then. Now they felt like diamonds she took for granted. She placed her forehead on her hands and whispered to herself, I can't lose him like this. That sentence alone was enough to make her stand up and make a decision. She grabbed her coat. She walked out, and she headed to Cross Tower at night, the uninvited. The guards recognized her instantly. Everyone recognized her, because she was the only civilian who had ever been escorted to the private rooftop before. They didn't question her. They let her in. She entered the elevator, pressed the top floor. Her heart hammered violently in her chest. Every second felt like a countdown. When the doors opened, she saw him. Ethan Cross was sitting alone in his office. Lights dimmed, sleeves rolled up, eyes empty. Papers scattered on the desk, untouched. He wasn't working. He was just existing. He didn't even look up. But the moment Olivia walked a few steps in, he froze. He felt her presence like electricity entering the room. Slowly, he lifted his eyes, and that exact moment, Olivia saw pain. Not anger, not ego pain, real human pain. She swallowed hard. Her voice trembled as she spoke. Ethan, I need to talk to you. His jaw tightened. He didn't tell her to leave. He didn't speak at all. He just let her talk. Silently. Olivia's chest tightened, because she never thought she'd be standing here again, in front of him, with his eyes on her, full of a broken silence. I need you to listen, she whispered. Stepping closer, Ethan didn't move, but his eyes stayed locked on her, sharp, intense. Waiting, Olivia took a deep breath. When I said no, it wasn't because I didn't care, she said, voice shaking. It wasn't because I don't feel anything for you. Ethan's brows lowered slightly, but his face stayed guarded. Olivia continued, voice breaking. I said no, because I was afraid of the world, of people, of how the media would rip me apart. I was scared society would destroy the value I've spent my whole life trying to protect. Her breath stuttered as tears started to fill her eyes. I was scared, Ethan. Not of you, of them. For the first time in weeks, Ethan blinked, slowly, like something finally reached him. Olivia's tears fell. I didn't reject your heart. I rejected the label they'd attached to me. Silence. Ethan leaned back in his chair, eyes closed briefly. He exhaled deeply, like he was finally breathing after drowning for weeks. He didn't yell. He didn't break. He simply opened his eyes again and spoke quietly. "You should have told me," Olivia nodded painfully. "I know. I broke everything instead." "I know." She stepped one step closer. "I don't want to lose you. I don't want this story to end with that night on the rooftop." Ethan looked at her like he was looking at fate, twisting itself back to him slowly. He didn't rush in to hold her. He didn't kiss her. He didn't confess back instantly. He simply said something. That proved this moment was not about passion. It was about maturity. "Then we don't rush." "Anything," he said softly. Olivia sniffed and wiped tears. "I want to rebuild." "Slowly." Ethan nodded. "Slow," he repeated. They held eye contact, raw, vulnerable, fragile. There was no ring now. No dramatic music. No fairy tale moment, just two human beings, finally honest. Ethan stood up slowly, walked to her, and stopped just inches away, not touching her, just close enough that she could feel his warmth. "We rebuild quietly. Privately," he said. "No media, no gossip, no world." Olivia nodded again. "Just us." He looked into her eyes and whispered, "Just us." In that moment, they made a silent pact. No sudden relationship, no labels, no pressure. Just two damaged people choosing to grow slowly, together, away from the toxic world watching. Months passed. No headlines, no rumors, no luxury dates that looked like publicity stunts, no paparazzi photos. Just two people, quietly learning each other again. Ethan and Olivia didn't become a couple overnight. They didn't jump into love like reckless children. They let trust rebuild, slowly. Ethan wasn't the cold billionaire anymore. He started showing up in little ways, small gestures, soft respect, subtle protection. He never asked her about marriage, never pushed, never demanded a timeline. He just showed, man, with actions, that he wanted her, not the version of her the world would label. And Olivia changed too. She started smiling again. The real kind, not the polite one. She stopped worrying about what strangers would think. She stopped imagining headlines. She stopped letting society direct her decisions, because every time Ethan looked at her with genuine softness, she understood something shocking. She mattered to him, not as a position, not as a status upgrade, not as a trophy, as a woman he actually wanted to build a life with, and that is what healed her fear. One Sunday afternoon, Olivia visited a small bookstore in Brooklyn. Not the fancy, polished kind, just a small wooden one with dusty shelves. It smelled like old stories and forgotten time. Ethan joined her quietly, wearing a t-shirt and jeans. No billion-dollar aura, no boardroom dominance. He looked like a normal man in love. They walked between the old book aisles, fingers almost touching, not holding hands, not rushing it. Olivia picked up a second-hand poetry book. Ethan just watched her, with the expression of a man who had already chosen his future. Then he said something unexpectedly gentle. "You know, I like this version of us." She raised a brow. "Which version?" "The version where we aren't performing for the world, where it's just us." Olivia smiled. "I like this version too." He stepped closer, not touching her, but standing close enough that she could feel his heartbeat in the air. "You aren't afraid anymore, are you?" he asked quietly. Olivia closed the book slowly and looked directly into his eyes. "No," she whispered. "I'm not afraid now." That single sentence healed everything inside him, because her fear once broke him, and her courage now rebuilt him. 2 weeks later, Ethan asked Olivia to meet him at Central Park, near a quiet part of the pond far away from crowds. It wasn't sunset. It wasn't dramatic lighting. It wasn't cinematic timing. It was just a normal day. He wore no suit, no brand, just a simple warm sweater and calm eyes. When Olivia arrived, he wasn't even holding flowers. He was simply sitting on a bench, waiting. She sat beside him quietly. For a long moment he didn't speak. Then finally he took out a small ring box, the same ring from the rooftop, but this time Olivia didn't feel fear. He opened it, slowly, just like the first time. But this time there was no shaking in his hands. This time there was confidence, and he didn't give a big speech. He just looked at her and asked, "Will you be with me? Not as a billionaire's wife, but as my partner?" Olivia didn't cry. She didn't hesitate. She simply took the rings and placed it on her own finger silently and whispered, "Yes." Her voice wasn't loud. Her voice wasn't dramatic. Her voice wasn't trembled. It was calm, grounded, final, like she had already decided long before her lips formed the word. Ethan exhaled, a breath he'd been holding for months. No cameras, no drones, no media, just a quiet bench in Central Park, where two souls finally synced their decisions. He pulled her into his arms gently, like she was something fragile he'd protect with his life. And Olivia held him back, not like a scared girl, but like a woman who finally chose herself and love at the same time. People think the happiest endings are loud, but sometimes the happiest endings are quiet, because real love isn't noisy. Real love is a calm heart. Real love is knowing you can choose each other without needing to prove anything to the world. Ethan Cross, the billionaire feared by the city, finally found something no money ever gave him: peace and Olivia Parker. The manager's daughter finally realized she didn't need to fear the world, because when love is real, you don't need the world's permission, and that is how their story ended, not with gold, not with status, not with headlines, with a quiet yes whispered in a park, between two hearts that learned to choose each other slowly.